We're standing here this morning talking with an amazing mechanic and restorer of these wonderful aircraft. This is Mike Porter from East Liverpool, Ohio. Mike has restored 16 Stearman aircraft, a Staggerwing, a Cub, and I forgot to tell you, he's 34 years old.
No life. Airplanes.
Where did this all start?
Well, I was very fortunate. My father was a commercial pilot, and he did quite a bit of flying in the 60s and 70s with skydivers, and that company had just about died off when I was born in 1980, but he's always been around old airplanes and flying them, and I've grown up around these things. So to me, being around these airplanes is just everyday part of life. My first word was plane, pointing at a Stearman.
Whose Stearman were you pointing to?
Oddly enough, this airplane.
Plane. That's an easy one.
Yes.
So tell me about growing up around these airplanes.
I've always had a very driving interest in aviation. As most people know, it's something you either love or hate. There's nothing in between. I was bitten from the bug right from the beginnings. Then about 1990 time period, an old friend of my dad's comes to him and says, I'm going to be starting a ride business with Stearman's T6, Travel Air, Waco in the New York City metro area, giving rides, sightseeing rides up by the statue and the Trade Center at the time. And that was right at the 50th anniversary of World War II and all the beginning of those events. So it was a very busy company with flying. He needed pilots. My dad flew for him. He did that for a couple seasons. It was a lot of work. He was putting 8 hours or better a day in flying a Stearman.
So you started hanging around here, obviously.
I was a loader and a line boy. The airplane needed oil, it needed gas. I did that. I helped them push the planes out when they were broken. Hey, kid, you can lend an extra hand, go do it. Learn them.
And how did it go from there to becoming a mechanic?
That particular point, one of the airplanes sold out of the ride business was actually this one. My father checked that individual out. Very nice gentleman from northern New Jersey who was an engineer. He liked the airplane, but you could tell he was a little uncomfortable with it, but it was something he always wanted to do. But about 95 time period or so, he says, look, I'll make you a deal. I'm not flying this airplane enough. Keep it in gas, keep it in oil, make sure it's got an annual, treat it like your own, use it as you want, teach your kid to fly in the airplane. I've actually already been flying Stearmans and getting dual in them well before that, about when I could reach the rudders at about 10. That's about when I could first reach the controls in the Stearman. It's a big airplane.
AML's patent-pending wireless induction charging system eliminates confusion over those charging cables, cuts down cockpit cable clutter, and allows you and your passengers to fly cordless and eliminate the cable nightmare. www.aviationmodificationleaders.com. Waco Classic Aircraft carries on the proud tradition of the open cockpit biplane, exhilarating to fly, beautiful to behold. With its classic graceful design, the Waco YMF-5D is custom built for each owner. Learn more at www.wacoaircraft.com. The aviation industry is far too automated and impersonal. Levels of care, service, and focus on customers have faded. Concierge provides premier customer care, leading our industry on a return to service. Find us at www.concierge.aero.
At that particular time that we bought the airplane, that comes along a little later in the story, it was all white. It was in civilian markings. Nobody knew the history throughout all this time period yet. As you see it right now, it is marked the way it was in 43 and 44. It was at Avenger Field, Sweetwater, Texas, with the Women's Air Force Service pilots. A very significant moment in history. Proud to be able to say I found all of that. Nobody knew. We didn't even know when we bought it. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent looking for documentation and information about the airplane. Getting the initial records is pretty easy. You can request those from the Air Force, and that's what I did. And they sent me a copy of the logs on the airplane that they had. And that began the real search for photographs, documentation, history, pilots that might have flown the airplane. And it took me 7 years before we actually found a photo of the airplane on the flight line to where I could identify it. And that was mission number one. We knew we were going to restore it, but I wanted to restore it to what it was, not what I necessarily thought was neat at the time. What was its buzz number during the war? How was it marked? That's a hard thing to do when you get into these airplanes because the trainers didn't have many pictures taken of them. Most of the cadets weren't even allowed to take pictures. That's one of the reasons why there's so few photos of them out there.
So you then started the laborious process of stripping all the old stuff off.
Well, at that time period while I'm researching and looking for photos and trying to find pilots, we started collecting parts, surplus parts. This engine, for instance, I collected all the parts with my father on it. They're all new surplus. They'd never run until I put it together. I was pulling them out of factory crates and wrappers.
How old were you then?
17. This stuff was all stored in my bedroom, by the way. It really hurts to stub your toe on a 670 engine cylinder in the middle of the night when you need a glass of water, let me tell you.
I know why you're not married now.
Yes, exactly why.
So then you started to rebuild the engine?
Yeah, I rebuilt the engine first because the engine was getting high time, put it on the airplane, kept it flying another 2 years, still collecting the original parts, surplus stuff, reconditioning and staging for the restoration, because everybody asked, how did you get this airplane done so fast? When I put the razor blade to it, 11 months later, it was back out the door again flying.
So this wasn't just a rebuild. This was a rebuild for authenticity.
Correct.
This was a rebuild
Full-on restoration is what I like to call it.
Okay. And you wanted to honor the Wasp as well.
That is correct. I wanted to honor the aircraft and the way it was originally done and the pilots that flew it during the war, the Wasp, because their story isn't told enough. So it's been a very neat journey. We've gotten friends with several of them. About 30 of them we know now have flown the airplane. One of them, it was funny, it was up in Geneseo, New York, at an air show there, and had other, magazines and articles and people there all rushing around her trying to get, interviews. And I said, why don't you come out to the airplane? I'll take you up in it. And she didn't quite realize yet that I had the airplane that she went to primary in. And it was like, I'm kind of tired. It's a long day for me with all this stuff. She gets about another 100 yards on the golf cart, starts recognizing the airplane. She says, oh, I don't care if you have to push, lift, pull, anything. Get me in the airplane. We're going flying.
Wow.
She turned 20 again. It was amazing. And one of the neat details that I do is I even went as far as replicating the original Form 1 that all the cadets and pilots had to fly. They had to sign off on the airplane and its condition before and after each flight. I got them to sign original Form 1s when I give them a ride.
Oh, how nice.
And then to take it one step further, if you look in every inspection plate in these wings, signatures of all of them. So they always fly with the airplane.
The debate is no longer about upgrading GA aircraft with NextGen, it's about financing it. The NextGen GA Fund is about doing just that. Find out more at www.nextgenfund.com.
Trig Avionics, presenting the world's smallest certified Mode S transponder with matching VHF COM radios that'll easily fit in the tightest panel space. Contact your approved Trig dealer now. Trig, smart, affordable, and future-proof.
So then this airplane became award-winning.
Yep, we've won, Best Stearman category in 2010 with a silver wrench at Oshkosh. It's also won National Stearman Fly-In, Best Army Air Corps Stearman. That one's kind of neat because that year I was competing with 100 other Stearmans. We take it to the last little detail when we do these.
So what does that last little detail mean to you? Why do you work so hard to bring the level of this finish on an airplane like this?
I feel I owe it to the airplane, really. I mean, it's a timepiece. It's put in its hard work and effort. Why not display it for the best it can be? It's just something I've always had in me. I've loved to build model airplanes as a kid, and I was the same way building those. I want the detail. I want it the way it should be. I've redone all the plating, like the original World War II silver plating on all the hardware in this airplane, all the screws. I'm a little sick. They all line up, but
So you must spend an awful lot of time researching all of those details, how they laced things, how they screwed things, how they covered things, all those little details.
Let's just say there were a lot of very late nights spent just looking over blueprints for every sub-assembly and finding out how was the finish, how was it done, where was it installed, placards, markings. There was stuff I had not a clue, and other restorers didn't have a clue when I got into this airplane that stuff had been put on it.
What an amazing journey. 34 years old, built a whole slew of airplanes, and honoring the past. That's pretty cool.
This airplane is when a nation came together and said, we've got to support our people the best we can. We're sending our kids off to war here. And it shows in the quality of the build and also at technology itself. There's another thing that we definitely need to highlight and preserve.
And yet, there's another story to be told with this airplane. You're going to be the keeper of this airplane for a number of years, and then when you pass it on or whatever, the airplane is going to have a whole nother lifetime. That must be kind of awesome to think about when you fly and keep up this airplane.
It is. It sends a chill down my spine. It really does. We don't have a clue what this airplane could end up and what it could do. It may have a very large piece in history yet. Again. So.
telling the stories of history. From Oshkosh 2014, AirVenture, Michael Maya Charles.